This video is the first in a 3-part series on how to become a leader. And one school of thought says that you have to do certain behaviors to come across like a leader. And we're going to look at that in parts 2 and 3. Here in part 1, we're going to look at what you should not do to avoid eliminating yourself as a future leader in the minds of other people. And that starts with how you handle yourself in groups and meetings. There's a lot of research on group and team leadership because they are like mini organizations. Leadership in groups is sometimes up for grabs, and existing leaders are always on the lookout for the next up-and-coming leader to promote. By the way, if you like this kind of content and want more, I have a whole page of free resources on leadership and communication on my website, including a free class on the top 5 communication skills that all professionals should have. I'll put a link to that in the description below this video. Ernest Borman and his colleagues at the University of Minnesota studied this issue. They showed that one way groups identify emerging leaders was that the rest of the group members systematically eliminated some individuals as possible leaders based upon what the group considered disqualifying behavior. Whoever survives this mental elimination process becomes the leader almost by default. Borman calls this a method of residues. And I love that. Residue means the small amount of something that remains after the main parts have been removed. So instead of thinking about choosing the best possible person, leaders sometimes emerge because that person is the only one who hasn't messed it up yet in the minds of the group members. As an overview, Borman saw 5 deal breakers that would immediately eliminate about half of every group from potential leadership. Anybody who was too quiet, too rigid, too aggressive, or came across as unintelligent or uninformed would immediately be disqualified as a leader by the rest of the group. And that makes sense. As you look at these deal breakers, it's difficult to see ourselves wanting to be led by somebody who has one or more of these qualities. That's the first list in the video, but let's get even more concrete and look at the specific day-to-day behavior that might eliminate you as a potential leader. Other researchers, Aubrey Fischel and Donald Ellis, developed 8 rules. They called these rules for securing a low-status position and eliminating yourself as an emerging leader. Rule number 1, miss meetings. Like many rules, this may seem obvious, but if you're missing meetings, nobody's going to see that as evidence of your leadership skills. As obvious as this may seem, I know many people who voluntarily overcommit themselves, and so they're too busy and they have to cancel or simply not show up for a lot of meetings. They might even personally believe this makes them seem so in demand that they are somehow high status. In reality, it creates the impression that they aren't reliable, and we want our leaders to be reliable. And you can't show leadership potential if you're not in the room at the meeting. Now, you might be saying to me right now, wait, Alex, our CEO cancels lots of meetings. And that might be true, but people who already have high status can get away with all sorts of suboptimal behavior because they have high status already and they have legitimate authority that comes with their positions. Emerging leaders don't have that yet. A better comparison would be to imagine you're in a room with a group of 6 other peers who all want to be the leader next. That's who you're comparing yourself to. And that's the mindset you should have when you're watching this video. In that light, research shows that the person who regularly misses meetings is not very likely to become the next leader. Rule number 2 to eliminate yourself as the next leader: don't speak enough at meetings. Yes, there's a time to listen, and we like when our leaders listen, but there's also a time to speak. As a rule of thumb, you don't want to be in the bottom 25% of the group when it comes to speaking up. You want to contribute at least an average amount or slightly more than average compared to other group members. If you come across as reluctant to speak up, that'll position you as a follower, not a leader. But what about talking too much and dominating the conversation? We're going to get to that one later in the list. Rule number 3, volunteer to be the note taker. Now, note taking is an important part of most meetings, but others again will generally see this as the role of a follower, a support role, not a leadership role. Sometimes people get selected to take notes because they're detail-oriented or because they're organized, and they do that job well. So if that's you, then it's okay to be the note taker once in a while, but don't let that become your job by default. Don't let that become a role. If it keeps coming back to you, then politely insist that the group rotates this responsibility. Number 4, explain that you're willing to do what you're told. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a good follower, but stating outright that you're willing to do what you're told is a very passive position to take. It's not the stuff of leadership. I hadn't mentioned this to my teenage son yet, but he told me that he overheard one of his teachers talking on the phone, and his teacher said into the phone to the other person, "I'm not good at making decisions. I'm good at doing what I'm told." My son said he almost instantly lost respect for the teacher and viewed him in a different light. So if you say things like this or even act like this and signal that level of passivity, it says to others, "I'm not a leader." Number 5, come on too strong, too early in the group's discussions and meetings. This is especially true when teams are forming and relationships are on the new side. If group members get too pushy or too dominating or too talkative at this stage, the rest of the group may say to themselves, "I don't want to work under a person like that." This is a tricky one because most leaders take initiative and put their point of view out there, but it's a balance. This is the difference between being assertive versus aggressive. An assertive communicator says what they need to say, but they leave plenty of room for others to do the same. An aggressive communicator wants to dominate and even control the conversation. And very few people willingly put themselves under a pushy, aggressive, conversational dominator. So the same tip applies here as it did for rule number 3 about not speaking enough. You want to contribute about an average amount or slightly more than average compared to the others in the group. Number 6, assume the role of the joker. Now, we all love a good sense of humor. We all like the energy to be up in the group. But when a person jokes around too much, it becomes a distraction. It communicates that you're not a serious person. I was studying a group once as part of a research project I was doing, and I was listening to the audio of that meeting later that day, and it was clear that the only way one of those group members contributed was by joking. Now, granted, he was really funny, and he was scoring some laughs, but he was not ever likely to get promoted as a future leader because that's the only way he was contributing to the conversation. And I like humor, and I like to make people laugh at least sometimes. Just make sure that if you're doing this, contribute to the task more than you're contributing humor. Rule number 7, act like an expert on everything and use lots of jargon, big vocabulary words, and technical terms. Now, many people falsely believe that their raw intelligence is what counts as leadership. That's not usually the case. Many effective leaders are, of course, highly intelligent, but they have learned how to speak in plain language that will appeal to the entire group. I've often heard a compliment in professional settings when somebody refers to a colleague as a true subject matter expert. But there are two sides to this complimentary coin. The unspoken downside of this compliment is that while the person is a true expert, they don't show potential outside of that role. They don't show leadership qualities, in other words. Part of being a leader is to speak to everybody. And that's why the most effective leaders I know don't use jargon, lots of big words, or technical terms. They simplify those whenever possible. Rule number 8, express a contempt for leadership. Some people, again, falsely believe if they complain long enough about the existing leaders or power or authority, that somebody will eventually put them in charge instead. It's almost as if they're trying to say, our leaders are bad, I will do better. But almost nobody actually gets the impression about the complainers that they would be good leaders themselves. From what I've seen, it's more likely that people who complain about their leaders will lose their job or be put in a role with less influence over time. Now, sometimes there are temporary exceptions. I remember a guy I know who was promoted, and he had frequently complained about higher level leaders, but he only lasted less than a year as a supervisor, and he had to step down, and it was a little bit embarrassing. People who complain about leaders rarely make good leaders themselves. So instead of showing contempt or mainly pointing out all the problems, you're much better off offering solutions and then offer to be part of those solutions as well. In summary, if you regularly do any of these 8 behaviors, it's likely that the people around you and certainly the leaders above you will not see you as an emerging leader. As you look at the list, use it to do an honest self-assessment about your own habits. In part 2 of this 3-part series, we'll look at 4 positive behaviors that'll help you come across as an emerging leader to watch. Until next time, thanks, God bless, and I'll see you in part 2.